So we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Brandon Diet, the Senior Manager for Sports Performance, Culture, and Marketing here at USA Fencing. Like I mentioned, I've been here for about I don't know, 3.5, 4 years, something like that. But I've been in the movement, the Olympic movement, for coming on 10 years. So definitely excited about that. This is the third week of our Engaging Our Community series. You know, the first week we had Dr. Carter on, who talked about taking risks. Last week we had Ashton Johnson from the Inclusion Playbook talk about creating inclusive spaces for LGBTQ athletes. And today we're going to talk about creating a conversation around adaptive sports and parafencing. So we are recording this session. And this session will be posted online, and you will be able to circle back and post notes from the first two sessions on the website. So you can look to the website, and we'll have some instructions on that here in a little bit. But we will post those sometime next week. So again, I want to thank you all for being here this week, taking the time out of your day to be a part of this conversation. We have a lot of great people who will be speaking to you today. It's very much an all-star panelist, so I want to thank all of them ahead of time for being a part of this. And the first person who I am going to call to the plates is Miss Jenny Boydston. And Jenny's been a part of the program now since she joined in 2009. She is a retired rec therapist and the director of sports and recreation for Methodist Rehabilitation Center, in Jackson, Mississippi. I affectionately call Jenny the godmother of the parafencing program. And so she's a great resource. She's been a great resource to me, to the athletes, to anybody who's looked to build a program. And so I am going to throw it over to Jenny to get us started. So Jenny, the floor is now yours.
Well, thank you, Brandon. And thank USA Fencing for hosting the new speaker series. And welcome to all participants today. It is important how we start 2021. And I can't think of a better way than talking about parafencing. I'm going to start the conversation today with a brief, somewhat commercial. So give me just a few minutes to set this up. Okay, Brandon, do we have two blades?
Sure do.
Thank you. Let's engage and touch lives in order to make a difference in lifestyles. Making a priority, setting a direction, and preparing a pathway for LA 2028. Two blades at a North American Cup, searching. Two blades at a World Cup, inviting. Two blades at a training camp, attacking. Two blades at the Paralympic Games and the Olympic Games, engaging. Two blades at a fencing club, circling. Two blades at a championship, touching. Two blades at a beginner's clinic, learning. Who are those fencers behind two blades? They are all fencers from all divisions, across all trainings and competitions. Together, we are USA Fencing. Now to the points that we would like to touch upon. Engaging our communities, creating, adapting, sharing an inclusive personal impact with a positive, welcoming environment for all. Starting a program can be a game changer for your organization for your athletes, and for the communities you serve. First, ask yourself the most important question. Will parafencing work for you? Bringing the sport to your club or your organization? If yes, then we are all familiar with the various steps in order to develop a parafencing program. Passionate leadership, a support system, accessibility, resources, equipment, eligibility of athletes, coaching, and sometimes the most important, networking and recruitment of fencers. The easy part sometimes is talking about these steps. The challenge is developing and organizing each aspect, some a little bit more difficult than others. Also, different regions of the country can have similar or different impacts on program development, in particular, networking, resources, support, availability of athletes and clubs, and leadership. For example, Mississippi is a rural state. It is my home state. As a therapeutic recreation specialist at the Methodist Rehab in Jackson, Mississippi, I was determined to create, organize, and lead a statewide parafencing program. Family and friends, they said it wouldn't work, no less be successful. But Methodist Rehab believed it was possible. I was confident that the program could thrive in the city of Jackson and the surrounding areas, but concerned over the challenges of providing opportunities to the small towns and communities throughout the state. After determining priorities, identifying target populations, utilizing my already existing statewide networks and resources, and seeking available coaches, the parafencing program was established in 2006. The program was well received and supported 100% by Methodist Rehab, offering facility space, financial support for travel, grant opportunities that purchased an abundance of fencing and parafencing gear. Coaching staff was established and supported, and my leadership to build and organize a 3-tier program was also established. Recreational fencing, competitive domestic, and competitive international. One of the most important aspects of development is recruitment, networking, and resources. Yes, these 3 can be your true north, but at times can be the most difficult to develop. But once achieved, it offers stability, trust, commitment, and strength. These 3 areas, recruitment, networking, and resources, they require 24/7 attention. Yes, 24/7 attention, utilizing to the highest degree of your skill, patience, understanding, dedication, flexibility, and communication. Networks and resources. Find, seek, and utilize a therapeutic recreation specialist or a rec therapist or recreation departments. Recruitment and networking is what they do best for the people they serve, especially creating programs for their organizations and in partnership with other organizations. Surround yourself with supporting networks. The more, the better. Adaptive sport organizations, VA medical centers, rehabilitation centers, parks and recreation departments, fencing clubs, allied health professionals, PT, OT, students and staff, schools, universities, support groups, outpatient clinics, and social media groups. Set up camps, clinics, demonstrations, exhibits, and awareness days, and use media, social, print, broadcasting, and the internet, a vehicle to carry your message to a targeted audience. And most of all, be patient, realistic, and have an open mind. See what's working in other programs and see if that would work in your program also. Example, Methodist Rehab organized clinics every other month at a different location throughout the state. Yes, we traveled to these areas, working in partnership with at least 3 to 4 different organizations in that area. This not only fosters awareness of parafencing, but introduces you to potential parafencers, increases networking, and possible sponsorships. At first, the Methodist program, I'd say the first 2, 3, maybe 4 years, was 13 fencers strong. We would travel, then that's across all 3 programs. We would travel to Northeast Mississippi, obtain 3 to 4 fencers. We'd go to the Gulf Coast, obtain 1 to 2. We went to the Delta, but we weren't as lucky there. We went to East Mississippi and it didn't happen there either. In the Jackson area, we always had 6, 7, 8, sometimes 9 parafencers, but we were always able to keep an active roster between 6 and 8 fencers throughout the years. Para-athletes, once you recruit them, you want to keep them. All fencers have the same basic needs, drives, and dreams. They want to fence, they want to train, and they want to compete. For the parafencers, focus on developing their abilities and what they can achieve. Be patient, be open-minded, communicate, and put the athlete first, not the disability. Be brave. If the parafencer needs something, they will ask. I would like to share 2 quotes from 2 Paralympians that I had the privilege to work with. The first quote, "I am an athlete playing a sport that I love, parafencing." The second quote, "Being engaged in parafencing provided me a sense of escape from my disability." In closing, find your support, utilize your resources, and develop abilities. In the words of Arthur Ashe, and I have used these words my entire career as a therapeutic recreation specialist, start where you are, use what you have, do what you can. Thank you.
Awesome, Jenny. Thank you so much for that. And Jenny touched on so many things that her and I have had conversations about just in the 3 years that I've been here. And you know, resources and outreach are going to be so crucial to how you build your program. And being brave, I think, is one of the big ones that Jenny mentioned. And so many times I use the example of you just have to go up and ask somebody what sport they play. And you know, I've done this in an airport and in a grocery store, just like a high school basketball coach would walk up to someone who is 6'7" walking down the hall and ask them what sport do they play. And I think that's so much of what we have to do. And I just want to piggyback off of that and just kind of give a kind of a state's, not of the union, because that'd be a whole hour, but a quick update and kind of where our para program is. You know, right now we have.
Hey, how are you?
About.
I'm just leaving. Are you here always?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just
I'm just leaving this for Amanda Duke.
Just a reminder to everyone to mute yourselves, please.
Shit.
Zoom world, right? But But yeah, so we have probably about 20 to 30 athletes strong at our events. And we're continuously looking to grow and provide opportunities for athletes, not only to be able to compete, but to train. And we're trying to find creative ways to how we can do that in terms of how we use our membership as a whole to better engage with between our parafencers and our able-bodied athletes. And we have some creative ways that we're thinking about doing that. And some of that information is out there and we'll continue to share going forward. And some of that will be walk and roll events and how we incorporate the para athletes and the able-bodied athletes. And so it's one of the things that I've constantly said, and I've said it to Jenny many times, I've said it to Bob Bodar in our membership department as well, and I've said it to many of you on the call, but if we can get 5 clubs to dedicate themselves to bring in 5 members, and I just mentioned that we have 20 to 30 athletes on a regular rolling basis, that pretty much doubles our program right there. And that creates that many more opportunities for the athletes in the pipeline, for the newer athletes, and not only domestically, but then of course we can start talking about internationally and things of that nature later. But it is the small steps. And so that's really what we're hoping as a goal as we turn the corner heading into the next quad. So Jenny, again, I definitely want to thank you for that. And I do want to call up our next guest, Miss Kat Beaucamp. Tough act to follow, but I'm sure she's up to the task. So again, Kat Beaucamp, 13-time parafencing national champion. In 2012, she achieved the goal of making the Paralympics in London at the age of 16. So she is our youngest Paralympian that we have to date. And she was recently elected to the USA Fencing's board of directors, with making her the first para representative at the board level. Currently, she works in the movement. She works with the Blind Athletes Association. So she knows very much the trials and tribulations of building programs, recruiting athletes, and all of those good things. And so I definitely am thankful, Kat, to you for taking the time for joining us. And I guess first I would just like for you to share kind of your journey into parafencing, because yours is a little different than how some of our athletes currently got into the sport.
Yeah, so first off, thanks, Brandon, for not only inviting me, but for having this in general. This is a huge topic, and it's overall an easy topic. The first step is just getting one athlete, and that's how my story started. I was an able-bodied fencer. I started at the age of 9, purely on a whim, because I wanted to sign up for tackle football. And I wasn't allowed, so I picked the second most violent sport and landed in fencing. And I did able-bodied for 4 years until I was in the Y14 bracket, where people are starting to acquire better footwork. And with my mobility disability, that kind of led to a broadening gap between myself and my peers. And so my parents were actually approached by a referee that I'm sure many of you know, Shumate, who himself uses a wheelchair and was in the parafencing movement back in the day. We always like to joke that he competed at the games the year I was born. So not to age him, but so he approached my parents and let them know about this whole new world that existed. Because the way my parents raised me, I was born in a small town in Indiana, and I didn't know anyone else with a disability. I didn't really have an interest of knowing anyone else with a disability, kind of because of that public connotation of disabilities that you see when you're growing up. So when I heard about the opportunity for parafencing, it was on one hand, off-putting, on the other hand, very energizing and exciting. I would have the opportunity to compete with people who have abilities similar to mine or disabilities similar to mine. But on the other hand, I would be quote unquote identified for those disabilities. And so this was an internal struggle for probably the first year of me competing. I also started parafencing in 2009, around the time Ginny did as well. And so my coach and I, when we made this transition to wheelchair parafencing, neither of us knew what we were doing. Neither of us knew what to expect. Back in 2009, this was before really the Paralympic movement had taken a hold of the world. This was before disability rights were really being talked about. This is, when, just an example, I guess, I was interviewed when I was heading to the Paralympic Games, and I was asked what I was most excited about for competing at the Special Olympics, which there's nothing against the Special Olympics, nothing against the Paralympics, but it's apples and Ford F-150s. They have nothing in common with one another. And just this public lack of awareness was something that my coach and I learned to navigate together. We learned parafencing as we went. That's one of the most beautiful things, in my opinion, about parafencing, is the fact that if you have a coach or you are a coach that knows blade work, you're halfway to parafencing right there. And that's kind of what my coach and I did. Was he was an able-bodied coach only. I was an able-bodied fencer only. We made this transition at first by sitting in a folding chair in the general shape of what we knew a fencing frame looked like. And we just started figuring it out together. This was also at the beginning of like the YouTube era. So we were able to YouTube, like, what is wheelchair fencing? It's a lot easier now that USA Fencing has all these amazing resources on how to get started in parafencing, what parafencing is. This is at the forefront of the movement, and it's super exciting for coaches and clubs who either have an athlete with a disability, know an athlete with a disability, or are in a community, which I'll give you a hint, all of us are in communities that have disabled athletes. It's just about, like Ginny was talking about and like Brandon touched on, that recruitment aspect and the engagement aspect. So when I transitioned to wheelchair fencing, that was, again, my first exposure to people with disabilities. And that was the first time I really felt like I had a place to belong. That was the first time I was embraced as an athlete, not in spite of my disability, but because of my disability. So I competed until I was 19. I made the decision to go to Indiana University. My first week, I walked into my advising counselor, and I showed them actually 2 job descriptions. One of them was essentially what Ginny did. I brought them this like bio of Ginny Boydston, and I was like, I want to be able to do this forever. How do I do this? How do I create an environment where people are able to feel like themselves, like they belong? Because I was 13 when I found wheelchair fencing. I'd already gone through that kind of integral part of figuring out who you are. And I didn't want other athletes, other children with disabilities to be that far along before they realized that there was a place for them. So I got my degrees in nonprofit management and recreational therapy. And along the way, I also realized that a lot of universities are not accessible. That's kind of just how it is, unfortunately. And I knew I couldn't at that time change the entire secondary educational system, but I knew I could change the one I was at. So myself and my best friend, who's a Marine, he and I came together and decided we're both part of these marginalized, underrepresented, underappreciated demographics. And we have a lot in common. We both have this kind of battle buddy mentality of a person with a disability finds it easier to bond with another person with a disability because we understand that shared experience, that struggle, that whether you're born with a disability or you've acquired a disability, you've had to go through to get to where you are. And the same typically goes with veterans. And so my best friend and I, we put our heads together and we figured out the way to do this was to create a fully inclusive adaptive sports club. So what that means is we created a wheelchair basketball club, but it wasn't at all just for people with disabilities. It was a community integration project where we were able to bring this marginalized community of veterans and this marginalized community of people with disabilities and create a larger, stronger force to be able to fight the marginalization, the underrepresentation, and the other stigmas that we faced at our university. And so we started from the ground up. We were lucky enough to get a VA adaptive sports grant. And we, in the first couple months, it's all about winging it. And it's about figuring it out and thinking on your feet. And that's the best part, is you learn as you go and you figure out how to get better as time goes on. And so we started a wheelchair basketball program, but we started so much more than that, in that our university now has accessible curb cuts at all buildings. All buildings now have accessible entrances. By opening what may just seem like a parafencing division of your club, you're creating so much more than just an opportunity for them to compete. You're creating an opportunity for them to be seen, heard, and be themselves, which gives them so much empowerment and gave me so much empowerment, which is why I'm doing what I'm doing now. When I was in college, there were these 3 E's that our professors always taught us about. And I thought it was just a load of malarkey. But the 3 E's are education, empowerment, and embrace. That's how you truly make a person with disabilities feel seen. You empower them to be whoever, whatever they want to be. You empower them to live their life, live their sport to the fullest extent possible. You educate the general public on the capabilities, not the disabilities, of those parafencers or those athletes in general. And you embrace everyone because you have created a community. You embrace the fact that regardless of what someone's ability is, gender, age, race, religion, whatever walk of life they have come from, you can create a community if you just try and ask the hard questions. So I graduated from Indiana University and I came out to Colorado Springs. I did an internship with US Paralympics, and I'm now working at the US Association of Blind Athletes, again, specifically with that goal of being able to expose children and younger youths who have disabilities of some sort or different abilities to the wide, wide world of Paralympic sport, adaptive recreation. Anyone can do anything. It'll just be a little different or in a different time frame than someone else. But giving them the opportunity, asking someone, do you want to try parafencing? On a whim, if they say yes, you grab a lawn chair, you sit down with them, and you figure it out. And that's, I mean, as simple and as silly as that sounds, the first step is just putting yourself out there and recognizing that you may be the only opportunity that this person will have to get involved in sport. That's a huge responsibility, but that's obviously something that if you're here, you're interested in taking on. So I'm very excited to see, I mean, over the last, let's see, 12 years now that I've been involved in the parafencing community, the growth has been exponential. You know, it started with 6 of us paying our own ways to get to world championships where we'd get leftover warm-ups. And now we've had athletes train at the Paralympic training site. We have training camps at the training site, and we have so many opportunities that would have never been possible 12 years ago. So with that growth, we have a long ways to go, but just seeing that growth in 12 years, I'm so phenomenally excited to see what you guys on this call and what USA Fencing in general can do for the sport of parafencing in the next 7 years before LA. So thank you.
Awesome, Kat. Thank you so much for those words. Kat said a lot of great things in there. That a couple of things that I want to piggyback off of. First and foremost, Kat has told me privately, and now I'm putting out there publicly, that she is going for the Paris and LA games. And so I'm holding her to that now that she is in our backyard of Colorado Springs. So you all heard it here first. I think, you know, one of the things that Kat mentioned was opening up a whole new world. And one of the things that we constantly talk about is that fencing is a niche sport and adaptive sports are a niche sport. And so really what we're trying to do is create awareness of a niche sport within a niche sport. And so it's funny because a lot of times when I bring up parafencing or wheelchair fencing, as we used to call it, people had no idea what it entailed, what it looked like. People didn't know if it was jousting, literally jousting, I have heard, going full speed towards each other with their swords out. I say that in jest, but it is an actual conversation I've had to have with people. And so, and a lot of times for me, it's as simple as pulling up a quick YouTube video and showing them what parafencing actually looks like and what they can really expect. And the other thing, and Kat, thank you for telling your story, because earlier I gave the example of just going up to somebody and asking, what sport do you play, right? And I think a lot of people may tend to think that, and it might be easier if you are approaching an athlete in a wheelchair. And Jenny can attest to this, and I have emails in my inbox right now, actually. There are, at your clubs, we have 47 people on this call. Let's say 20 of you are club coaches or club owners. At your club, you may very well have 1 or 2 athletes who are eligible for parafencing. I will say that a lot of times that there is a hesitation for those ambulatory athletes, those who don't use a wheelchair on a daily basis, to train in a chair and to be a part of parafencing. That's a conversation that we've had to have with athletes continuously. And like I mentioned before, it's a conversation that's in my inbox right now, trying to get an athlete to join the parafencing program. So it is an ongoing conversation. I will say, if you have questions about eligible disabilities, then Jenny is a great resource for this. There's also the IWAS website. We have some information on our USA Fencing website if you just click on the parafencing page. And please do feel free to reach out and have those conversations with us. We can put you in touch with an athlete in our program who's also had those same conversations. But again, it is an ongoing conversation. We do have athletes all over the country who are eligible for parafencing. And and to kind of wrap a bow on that conversation, one of the great things that Kat mentioned is that community, right? And I think as more clubs start to incorporate seated fencing, then I think a lot of those thoughts and hesitations will start to evaporate as they start to see that it's not just them in the chair necessarily, but it is the club. And we won't necessarily talk about those things on this call, but we can definitely have conversations about how some clubs are incorporated seated fencing into their everyday routine in their club and making it more viable for the adaptive athletes that they currently have in their program. So again, Kat, thank you very much for that. Kat mentioned something that I think is, I don't know how well known it is amongst the people on this call, but she mentioned the VA grant that she received at Indiana and the ability to use those monies to build a program. And I think that that is a great jumping off point to three guests that we have on the call with us as well, who are representatives from the VA. We'll talk a little bit about that grant as well as some other information, because the veteran presence is very much a presence in our sport, the adaptive sport, in parafencing, as well as the adaptive sports world. And I definitely think it's something that we need to acknowledge and make sure that we have the right tools in place when we make the approach to VAs, to military personnel, and reach out and make those grant requests. So we have, and I'm going to give a quick overview of their bios. They're doing some amazing work, and so I definitely will encourage you to check out our website to read their full bios. But we have Jonathan Glassberg, who's a physical therapist at the Manhattan VA and is the VP of the federal section of the American Physical Therapy Association. We have Dr. Allison Prusner, who's the clinical program manager for the Veterans Health Administration Office of the National Veterans Sports Programs and Special Events. These are all government titles, so they are a mouthful. I apologize. And lastly, we have Dr. Lee Nelson, the Director of National Veteran Sports Programs and Special Event Programs Office under the VHA's Rehabilitation and Prosthetic Services. He oversees the 5 national rehabilitation adaptive sports medicine events and the largest organized therapeutic arts program for veterans. So I believe first we are going to kick it over to Mr. Glassberg, and I am going to make him the host here in a second. All right. The floor is all yours.
Thank you, Brandon. I see the ability to share now. But let me start off. Ginny and Kat and Ginny, tough acts to follow. And we are obviously all on the same page because we have a very brief presentation here. But what we plan to talk about are things you two just spoke about. And so I think that's fantastic. It's nice to be, obviously we're together here. You know, one of the basic tenets we have is that we focus on ability, not disability. All people are disabled in some manner or shape or form, and some are obviously more. It's not the disability, it's the ability we're trying to look for. So we're going to give a couple of tips and tricks of what we learned from local, regional, and national events, which we've all been a part of and have organized and participated in. And we got that nice brief introduction. If we start going through all our experience or credentials, it would take up the whole time. So we could save some time afterward. And obviously, you'll have our contact information. Feel free to reach out at any time. We love to engage. So, you know, one of the things, again, you both touched on this. How do you get fannies in the seats? How do you get people there? How do you get participants? How do you get people to learn about this event, which they may never have engaged in this activity before? Well, it's reaching out to your local entities. You know, with us, again, we are VA centric. This on the right, this picture here is a flyer a couple of times a year, I have what I call a VA Adaptive Sports Information session. And I promote it, we promote it through public affairs pretty broadly. And we, in our medical center, supports it and gives us a really nice large space within the medical center to hold it. And we invite our community partners, our Fencers Club, which is, we'll have some pictures in a moment, our boxing club, our equestrian clubs, sailing and kayaking, rowing, and others. And they all kind of set up booths. They're not really booths, it's not like a convention center, but there's tables, and some people have better goodies than others. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a medical center. It doesn't have to be a VA medical center. It could be a rec center. And Ginny mentioned this when talking about her travels around Mississippi. Which sounds, I'm in New York, and I don't know, traveling around Mississippi sounds terrifying. But you obviously made it back. You look great. But community centers. Like I said, rec centers, American Legion, other kind of fraternal organizations, they can have like health fairs and such. And promoting what you have to offer is a very worthwhile thing to show these people. So, and generally, they'd be thrilled to have you, I'm sure. So you set up a table, you have some kind of pamphlets or what have you, or maybe even a little bit more. So what do you do when you're there? Well, here's our fencers in our atrium at the medical center. A couple of these are veteran participants who have chosen to be ambassadors of the program, and you meet the people, let them know what you're about, show them what you're about, and then also instead of not just little handouts or pamphlets, have some sheets there to sign up and get some information from the people that are interested to help get them enrolled. Something you shouldn't do is don't try and show everyone up. Like we have this gentleman here who's from a local boxing gym. Actually, it's Gleason's world famous boxing gym. It's a fantastic place. But you can see he looks a little intimidated by the weaponry, by the regalia. The fencers look great. And we actually, the fencers put a lot of effort into these events. And you can see behind, we have a little exhibition. People from just walking too closely to the exhibition for safety's sake. But the fencers, I mean, you got to admit, it looks great. It's impressive. And they garner a lot of attention from our veterans at those points. Again, go around the room, speak with the people that are there, and hopefully, for any person that you get involved, you have an opportunity to literally, and I hate to sound melodramatic, but literally change someone's life for the better. And we get those stories all the time from multiple programs, not just the fencing program, but other programs where people dive into it and live it. And it's very special, and it's a greatly rewarding thing to be a part of. Just one other thing, if there are other events in your community that you see, you're like, wow, that's a fantastic event. Even if it's not related to fencing, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be related to sport. But if it is, that's even better. Get in touch with those organizers. See if you could set up fencing as an exhibition. This past year, we have a wildly successful event, which was actually founded by Dr. Nelson, who's on the call. He's going to speak in a moment. It's called Heroes on the Hudson. It's a premier adaptive maritime event for disabled New York, New Jersey veterans. And it's been a very successful event. And it's fairly large. And realized, you know what? The Fencers Club said, they've had a little issue with recruitment. They reached out, we reached out, and they put on an exhibition at this other event, which was about sailing and kayaking, and garnered a lot of attention and got a bunch of new members. So if there isn't a successful event, reach out to those organizers and see if you could, again, you guys look great. You show up in your gear. It's exciting, and people are likely to get something from it. So that's enough about me. Let's see, I think we have Dr. Prusner coming up now.
Yeah, so I'm Allison Prusner, and I get to be a part of the National Veterans and Sports Programs and Special Events Office. So it is quite a mouthful, but it's a great office that VA has that is really aimed at providing adaptive sports to veterans with disabilities and just providing all of those benefits that we know come from participating in sports and engaging within the community. And we really have a vision of being the leaders in adaptive sports for VA and really helping to kind of complement and support all of our other kind of rehab specialties that are across VA. Next slide, if you don't mind, Dr. Glasper.
I don't work for you. No, I'm only joking.
For the next 5 minutes or 2 minutes, you do. So what is this grant program that Kat nicely mentioned earlier? And so the grant program was really a program that is funding 3 things. So it's providing sports and providing programming to veterans and members of the armed forces with disabilities. It's training other individuals to be providers who will then serve veterans and members of the armed forces. And then there's a host of other kind of like related efforts, one of them being classification that is kind of in this kind of last bucket of activities. So, you know, we've funded this year, we have 119 grants that were just funded out of about $15 million. 1.5 of it was for equine therapy, but the rest of it went to other kind of general adaptive sports that were hitting 1 or 2 or 3 of these kind of different types of adaptive sports activities. So so if you want to think like, can I apply? Should I apply? First, you got to make sure you're eligible. Not that we don't want you to go through the application process, because you might have the opportunity to then talk to me about everything you did right and wrong on your application. But to be eligible, you have to be a non-federal entity with significant experience managing a large-scale adaptive sports program. There's definitions that are in our regulation, and then we'll put them out in the notice of funding availability of what defines significant experience and large scale specifically. But the significant experience is 2 years, and it's got to be the most recent 2 years. 2 years of experience managing or like providing adaptive sports opportunities. And the sport opportunities need to be to individuals with disabilities that are similar to disabilities that we'd see across the veteran population. The large scale component of that is that the program needs to be at least 50 members with disabilities, or members that cross at least 5 congressional districts. So those do not need to be veterans, which is often a misunderstanding. So people think they're not eligible. It's just members with disabilities so you're providing sports on a large scale basis, and that you have at least 2 years of experience doing that on the team that's providing it. So they're always 1-year awards right now, I guess, until something changes. They're 1-year awards. Recently, we've been having them up to 500 or 750,000 per grant, and that's for 1 year. So you don't have to ask for that unless you have a great plan that would spend it all in 1 year. Whatever that limit is, though, is always posted in the notice of funding opportunity. So it'll be very clear every year. We're offering training and programming in nearly every state this year, and it's definitely encouraged to try to identify that we're offering different programs across the country and in different sports. So we want to make sure we have a nice spread of sports and spread of locations. And then our notice of funding availability typically releases in January. I know we're getting towards the very, very end of that projected timeline. So keep your eyes peeled, and hopefully it'll be coming out. But a great way to get more information if you want to kind of confirm eligibility or just get any other additional information is if you go to our webpage, which is right there. It has the regulations. We'll post the notice of funding availability there. The other great thing is there's a space at the very bottom of that page. You can put your email in and join our Adaptive Sports Grants listserv, which our media team will make sure is kind of notified of any changes and updates to the grant program. And now Dr. Nelson.
All right. Hello. Thanks for having us. A couple things. Let me touch on a couple things. One is I put in that before I jump into what I'm supposed to talk about. I just threw in the chat box there the fact sheet for our program office. /adaptive sports. I'll put our website in here too. This has information on what I'm going to talk about and what Dr. Prusner just spoke about. I think what's great about you kind of see what Dr. Glassberg had spoken about, as well as Kat and Ginny, and I think the kind of all of those elements are the segue too. So if you're not quite at that level of the criteria that would be, to add a veterans component to your club, You know, the building the foundations now and over the next couple of years, you can easily get to that criteria that would qualify you as that large scale organization, you know, in as quick as 2 years time. So I don't be discouraged by that if you don't meet that criteria yet. Some of you may. You know, I think the other thing of areas you can recruit from, kind of parlaying on Ginny's list there. Obviously, I'm having worked in medical centers most of my life, or most of my career at least. That's, you know, obviously my go-to. But, you know, there could be a local specialty wheelchair clinic in your town, something along those lines, someplace that does like custom seating for wheelchairs, and you know, those in addition to like other adaptive sports organizations like Dr. Glassberg mentioned, I think are all great. And yeah, so, and then kind of the final program. So there's 8 programs under our program office. You can see in that fact sheet I put in the chat. Actually, I think I direct messaged that chat to somebody on accident. I will repost that to everyone. So now
That went directly to me.
Yes, sorry about that. All right, and then so I have it out there for everyone now. Now you can see the fact sheet. There's 8 programs in our program office. The grants being one, another one being this training stipend. So this is for elite athletes. You know, if you do have veterans in your club that do really, you know, find that the sport is kind of a path for them, this is a nice program to help kind of continue that. You know, I'm sure Kat can speak to it better than I can, but I think to be an elite athlete, it's hard to work a 9 to 5 job while you're maintaining that incredibly high level of athleticism and competition. And you know, that's you know, that when you think about how little money there is in amateur sports, you know, there's even less in the world of the Paralympics. So we're lucky enough that we have the opportunity to help support veterans. We need your support. Brandon's actually our point of contact who certifies the athletes for this program. We currently have 2 women veterans on this stipend program. We have about 150 veterans across the country in the 30 different sports we support. And you kind of see here, this is just kind of the fun slide that shows the increase we've had of Paralympians that are veterans. And I think that this program and being able to support them is it's a stipend of about $600 to $1,200 a month, depending on your depending on the number of dependents you have. And you can jump to the next slide here, Jonathan. The specific standards to be on this are really maintained by USA Fencing and the Parafencing program. And we go over these every year with Brandon. But ultimately, you know, this is what it is, right? Be a member of USA Fencing, and you know, I think that helps with just the standards that it takes to be a member of that professional, or probably all of your professional organization. You know, the big part of this is that you're monthly certifying that you're training. So these folks need to have a coach. They need to be on a training program. And those are elements that you can help them with as well. And then they have these, you know, there's a ranking criteria, and this is posted on our website. You can get to it through the main website or to this direct link here, this website link on this page. That'll get you directly there to kind of see how you have to rank out for fencing. And, you know, these will update it, you know, they can update as frequently as they need to be, at least annually. We encourage you to work through Brandon on these sorts of things. But, you know, I think as you bring veterans into your clubs, you know, I think our main goal isn't necessarily this. I think if you find somebody who can compete at that elite level, that's awesome. And this is a tool for you to have in your toolbox. But you know, I think big picture wise, and you know, what Jonathan and Allison and I are all care about the most, right? It is ways to serve veterans. And you know, I think whenever we can use our healthcare model and take it outside of the hospital, and it really, we're just integrating veterans into the community. That's what we want. So every veteran that becomes a member of your club, you know, there's nothing I would like more than to see that. So I think finding creative ways to integrate, you know, all veterans into your clubs is great. I think as you build your veteran community, it'll help you grow your parafencing community as well. with the program, Jonathan works with the local US or with Fencers Club in New York City. That started as, a big bring all the different VAs came together for kind of a kickoff and started bringing like, okay, this isn't so scary. Check out this club. There's a place for you here. And then the program really grew in the non-parafencing athletes. And as that veteran community grew, it then led to a growth in the parafencing community. And so, I think I obviously am going to encourage you to include veterans in your community, and it can be a nice area of growth. And as you get more expertise working with athletes with disabilities, there's an opportunity to build out your adaptive program through the VA Adaptive Sports Grant Program as well. So I'll stop at that point, and just again, reiterate thanks to Brandon for inviting us and everyone else for being here. And feel free to email us at you can say hi now if you're going to. You can. And you feel free to reach out to any of us with any questions. And here's our website again. You can find us on social media as well at Sports for Vets. So thank you.
Bye-bye.